to another episode of the Future of the Music Industry podcast. I am your host, Javi. I am joined, as always, by Atlas and Prez. Today, we are talking a bit more about current events than usual, actually. We are going to be recapping a photo shoot that we just did last week. Some of the artists might have been there. I am loading up the chat feature now so that I can see if any of you are talking about that down there. But before we get into that, or while I'm getting into that, rather, let's just talk about how the photo shoot went and the things that you have to juggle as kind of a photographer there, because I know we have some people across the various branches that are aiming to kind of be in the visual space and serving their chapter in that way. So before I pass this off, I did just want to kind of get into what you kind of have to deal with on the management end to kind of make an event like this happen. So the first thing that is very, very evident, you need to have some kind of roster so that you can be filling slots. When you're going to be doing a lot of subjects in one event, you need to have a way to kind of cut down on the chaff and not just have people kind of walking over each other. And you can do that very simply by just having time slots that you can allow people to come in and out for, so that each person has their dedicated time and you're not essentially having to deal with that separately as the photographer's trying to get things done. Prez, we used to actually do rehearsals like that, if I'm not mistaken. Are there any kind of overlap points there that you can think of?
With anything, organization is always going to be key, right? Like, I mean, whether it be for rehearsals, auditions, the photo shoots, like, I think a lot of what it is that we end up talking about when it comes to like working with students or even just working with like artists and creatives in general is that you can't really under like sell the importance of just being organized and being able to answer as many questions for people as you possibly can before they even ask, so yeah, like that's just really my whole thing on it. And especially knowing that, so we did the first photo shoot, but now we're getting into to the point where we did the first photo shoot is basically an example, but now it's for the chapters themselves to start conducting their own photo shoots, and really just the importance around like making sure that you have quality images to be able to brand your artists, your executives, and your chapter, in general.
And for that, right? Because ultimately, we wouldn't have done this photo shoot if we didn't have a reason to have to get these kind of things done. And obviously, this is coming kind of off of the back of the roster reveal that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. All of that obviously is kind of tying into the bit of our curriculum that we're teaching on branding. So for that, and to kind of get into the effectiveness of branding, or I suppose before we get there, let's just take a step back and kind of define that for people that might be confusing the terms for branding and marketing and things like that. Prez, can you give us like a quick definition of when you're talking about branding and what it comes to kind of making a clear and effective brand? What exactly are you talking about? How does branding differ from marketing, for example?
Your brand is what people say about you. Marketing is what you're trying to sell to others. Put simply, your brand is really more so about understanding how it is that you are being seen out in the world and by people.
Okay.
Um, and there are things that you can do to deliberately affect your brand, but it's not like paying for visibility. That's 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 not really helping your brand. It's like I'll give you a case in point. Like there's a lot of artists. There's a lot of artists out there who, think that they can just spam people, like, as long as they're being visible, they're willing to do like outrageous things. They're willing to just drop their music, and we have, everybody knows about the artists that are just like randomly like DM their stuff to people and all this other stuff. But without understanding exactly what message you're sending or who's receiving it and seeing the message, you're ultimately just throwing, you know what I'm saying, like your content into the ether. If that
Mm,
kind of makes sense, it's like, you can pay to have your face on a billboard. That doesn't mean that people who haven't already heard your name haven't developed a poor understanding of who you are even when they see it, if that makes sense.
mm. Yeah, Atlas, I saw you made a face when he started actually getting into it. Do you kind of have a differing opinion?
Not necessarily. No, I. It was just the first time I ever heard that perspective.
Mm,
That was new to me. Admittedly, that was new to me. I was always, and maybe it's just because the perspective that I always took was like, what do you call it? It's from the technologist perspective.
mm.
But marketing was always a strategy. Branding was the identity, right?
Makes sense.
Um, and but it's different when you're talking about a product, right?
Right.
When you're talking about just the product and there's no emotions attached to the product, right?
Mm,
So the way Derek put it in perspective, there's a bit of context there that was new to me, which is the point. Like if I'm summarizing this properly, in the music space, it is more so about your branding is more so about the context and how people know you,
mm.
your reputation, your rapport, right? And marketing is just the method in which you try and articulate that or gain or that. Am I right?
Yeah.
I would agree. Yes.
Because this is one of those subject matters, admittedly, I don't know a lot about. I'm not even gonna pretend like I know a lot about it. Like, especially someone who's for the most part, who enjoys being a ghost. So,
Enough. Yeah.
um,
Agreed. Actually.
but that does bring up another question, though. There is, when it comes to our students or just artists in general, do you feel like the sophistication of what is or is not on brand has increased over the years? And what I mean is, like, I'm seeing it in business, right? I'm seeing it in technology anyway,
Okay.
where we talked about this kind of lightly before, where you're not, you know, it's not you against two or three other people in the market and you guys slugging it out. Like,
Mm,
everyone wants to sit here and believe that they're like, it's Pepsi versus Coca-Cola. That's not the market. Like, people drink both, A, and
right.
B, they also drink other shit. Like, it's
Yeah.
not, no one's really just like, this is the only options I have, right?
Mm.
So we talked about that before, just on like the product and your availability of what you're putting out in the world. How do you feel like that's washed over into branding and marketing? Because I know in the business side or the startup side of it, what we're seeing is just being more faithful to a particular niche sometimes, or your particular vision, or how you want your stuff to be articulated, and it's less pressure about having to compete with someone else. In that regard, it's just more pressure on clarity and making sure
Yeah.
that the people who do identify with that are more, they're able to find you. Do you feel like that's kind of playing into the music industry in the same way when it
Yeah.
comes to
Actually.
branding and marketing?
Yeah. I think you're seeing a lot more kind of breadth of kind of categorical content that each individual kind of person as a brand is able to kind of convey to their audience, because the understanding now, especially when we're talking about brands as people, or I suppose people as brands, whereas in like the 50s, right, you go back way like super far, where there was really no direct access to the products that you were choosing to support or not support. If you were listening to Nat King Cole, you buy the album, maybe you go see him live, and that's essentially all you can do. But now, where your favorite artists, you can follow them on 4 different platforms, you can essentially keep up with their life, more or less. You're going to it kind of necessitates the fact that you're going to have to essentially like diversify even your understanding of what is kind of an artist's brand, because now you can get into what this artist's skincare routine is, and that can now be a part of their public brand, whereas before it's just the music or the product that you're consuming. Now you I suppose, in terms of connecting with the brands that you like in this artist, now you might find yourself wearing what they're wearing, shopping where they shop, eating what they eat, using the products that they use, things like that. So the artist is able to kind of leverage themselves in I think, a more kind of holistic way beyond just the one thing that you might have found them for. Now, essentially, artists and brands in general, I think, can be expanded to, I think, kind of accommodate many more things when you think of an individual.
But that also creates what I think a lot of independent artists kind of like see as the frustrating part too, though. And I mean, in this day and age, because it's like, I was having a conversation with Moses Davis from Columbia Records this past week, and we were talking about how the major difference between the superstars of old that all of us look up to and the ones from today is that, like, back back then there was no real, like, understanding from the public that you were really like dealing with somebody in like their personal life, right? Like, every single artist and persona back then was a character. um you didn't really know those people. You might have, you know the general public might have felt like they knew them,
Mm.
but they really didn't, because so much about their day-to-day lives were not, public,
Public.
right? We weren't investing anything else about Michael Jackson other than like the music, right?
Mm.
And but now, that has drastically changed in the sense where, yeah, like, every single thing that embodies who you are as a person is essentially what makes up the totality of your brand. And the problem with that is, if we're just being real, if we're just being honest, I think that that makes it really difficult for people who haven't really reconciled with the fact that, like, they have to be comfortable being themselves. um we talk about it kind of a lot, but also, like, not nearly enough, that there's a lot of these artists out here who are making things or behaving in ways that they think people want to see, which means that it's really hard for them to figure out how to communicate who they are, because who they are and who they want people to see them as don't necessarily correspond with one another, which
Mm.
means that when you have some artists out here who are just legitimately being themselves, they can show every single aspect of their lives, from the moment they wake up and brush their teeth to the moment they put their bonnet on and go to bed. They're perfectly fine in their own skin, and they can be themselves in every single moment of that, which, and because they don't mind showing all of that and giving people a glimpse behind all of that, because there's nothing about it that's uncomfortable or that they don't really want to show, now that's the one who has endless amounts of content in this day and age, where the amount of content you show is what makes up the context that people have about who you are, right? So if you're somebody and you're an artist, but you only want to be an artist on that Saturday evening when you're trying to go to a show or go to a studio, and every other aspect of your life is something that you were either ashamed of or wished you weren't really dealing with as a person, then you're going to be fighting uphill trying to convince a general public that you are who you say you are when they're comparing you to someone else who they can see every single aspect of who that person at least claims to be.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm sorry. You were gonna say something, Javi?
Well, yeah. So I just kind of speaking to what Prez said a moment ago, actually, when we were defining. Or no, actually, that was you. Uh, I think therein you have to start thinking about even the exclusion or inclusion of kind of these seeing behind the curtain, kind of always on, always, if you want to see it that way, connecting with your audience. That, in my opinion, just seems to be another part of marketing at this point. It is something that you can choose to be a part of your brand or not. But if we're talking about marketing as being the plan, then you can essentially be intentional with that, it would seem, and having either the inclusion of your kind of day-to-day activities be a part of who you allow your artist to connect with you as an artist or as an individual, or very much not, and having the fact that you cannot see me until I want you to see me, or until I have something ready to show you, having that be a part of who the public has to recognize you as, because they can't have you another way. It just seems to me that that is just another tool in the toolbox now.
Yeah, I don't honestly, I actually don't think that that's the case anymore. I think that it was maybe not even that long ago. I think because what you're talking about is like the mystique, right? Like basically leaving people kind of like waiting and wanting more so that when you actually put stuff out, like, then people are flocking to it because that's what makes you so unique. I honestly don't think that that's a thing anymore. I think that that ship has sailed because it's just attention. It's all a commodity now, right? Like it's so there are too many people to follow, and
Yo,
the algorithm supports so much frequency and consistency that if you're someone who thinks that you can fall off the grid completely and then just pop back up whenever you feel like it, I don't I think the complete and total landscape of the platforms that we have available to right now has changed. And I think the only time that that's different is if you've in the moments when you were serving your audience, you were developing some sort of direct communique to that audience that you can tap back into in the first place. But even then, it still would have required for you to build that in the first place.
you're you know what? You hit something when what you were talking about, Prez. Like you said something that struck a chord with me that I think you're 100% right. I actually wholeheartedly agree with you because it taps into something that we've been talking about. We talk in and out about. It's just the new economics of social interactivity, where all of the stuff that the music industry as we know it today was on a very narrow funnel, right? It wasn't built. It was not built for millions of people to be able to instantaneously engage anybody
Right.
at any time. It wasn't designed for that. It was designed for a handful of people to control the ins and outs as it happened in real time. And you can tell because instead of adapting it, they just keep fighting to increase the size of the funnel,
Right.
but maintaining the shape of a funnel. And the more and more people get forced through, right, it breaks the boundaries of the funnel. And it's finally gotten to a point where it's completely broken, where you can see a complete different business model that older artists went by that today are the death of an artist's career. Like there is no, like people have this, for example, people make this conversation of like, oh well, they like to make this comparison of Chris Brown and Michael Jackson, right? The elephant in the room that no one says is that the nature of the industry that Michael Jackson came up in versus the one that Chris Brown came up in are two different industries. They have
Right.
they have two completely different sets of problems because the economy of how the industry works, it changed fundamentally. We'll never have another Michael Jackson, not because the talent's not there, not because the skill isn't there, not because the people don't like it anymore. It's because the industry that supported that Michael Jackson that we know of doesn't exist in the same way anymore because there are just way too many people at the other end of that funnel. It's
Right.
just too much.
Right.
So now it's gotten to a point where instead of the mystique being something that you can maintain because the funnel allowed for the mystique to happen. That's the important detail. The funnel allowed for it to happen because then it was a show. Now you got 24-hour live streams that people are doing. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't keep up a character that long. Matter of fact, that's the whole reason why they watch them. They
Yep.
don't want to see the character, they want to see the person.
Mm.
And anytime someone tries to create a character, what happens? They're sitting up there they're sitting up there having court cases with Fulton County. Anytime someone wants to put up a character, now they facing RICO charges. Let's just say it out loud for what it is.
Mm.
Like that's what happens when you're trying to keep up a character that's not you. You end up there. But you know who but that is the nature of the beast now. Now that the economy has changed, you're right. It's skewed more towards realism. Nobody wants to see the character because they know it's not real. The cat's out of the bag. Like they know it's not real. They know that there's nothing ever gonna be real about it. So it's really a quest for the opposite. It's how real can you show me?
Right.
Can and I feel like our artists, we do have an opportunity here that I don't want to miss. I don't think that we will miss it, but I think it needs to be said out loud for NCEG artists. I think we have the opportunity to prepare them for the industry that's happening and not for the one that is passing.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And because I want to edit one thing that you said about they know it's not real. I actually think that it's the same effect, but it's technically the exact opposite. It's that the public assumes that everything that they see is real, right? So if you can't keep up this thing that's supposed to be the real you, it will inevitably, like, the bottom will eventually fall out. Like, if you're trying to play a character, you will eventually run out of steam for that character. It's not necessarily because the audience is so good at seeing through what's real and what's fake. It's because only something that's real can be on 24/7.
The only reason why I understand what you're saying and I get that. I do. And I think I think that becomes a question of the intelligence or the naivete of the viewer. I think it
100%.
becomes that. It does, because think about it. Like, we've known this since the beginning of time, of recorded history. Like, it's the reason why Rome enacted the gladiator matches. You know what I'm saying? Like, they knew these men were going to be going into this arena to die. Somebody was going to get killed. It was, and they were their heroes, right? Now, they were worshipped because of that. But at the same time, they knew that these were prisoners. You don't become a gladiator because you're a great warrior. You become a gladiator because you're a slave, right? Like, it wasn't a thing where they didn't know the circumstances. They just loved the mystique of it. They loved the what do you call it? The performance of it. To your
Mm.
point of saying, like, the audience wants, they believe everything they see. I understand where that comes from. I kind of liken it to I kind of like it into Ric Flair now. Like how Ric Flair is old and people will still come up to him in public and be like, woo, he'll do it. But he's like, he's like mad old now. So it's this like real, like,
Definitely something different.
it's different, right? He's probably going to be doing that till the day he dies, right? Like, he kept the character up. But that's
Mm.
because it's not that we don't know that he's gotten older. You know what I'm saying? It's not that we don't know, we can see it. It's the fact that he's still giving the effort to perform,
Right.
Well,
right?
yeah, and I think that he's also not. I mean, to that point, we're also not getting to like see his morning routine where he has to take all of his pills and his, like we're
Right.
not
Yeah,
we're not seeing an unprepared version of him, despite the fact that we realize that he may not be the same man anymore. It's like you're still really not catching an old man. You're still just seeing old Ric Flair, which is still the
exactly.
character.
Right.
It's not
Exactly.
an old man, it's old Ric Flair. That is
Yeah.
Right.
perfect.
Because at the end of the day, because it's about back catalog, right?
Hmm.
It's about the back catalog. When you're talking about these legacy artists who have years and decades of content, interviews, music videos of them in character, in today's context, they could post all of that old stuff, clips of it every single day that shows them in character from back then,
Mm.
right? And maintain the character without them having to be on
Mm.
every single day and every single hour of every single day. You, as an independent artist who's new and doesn't have any back catalog for people to reference who you are, means that you're making this from today forward. So you're trying to compete with people who have decades worth of content establishing their character, and you can't go 2 weeks without breaking yours.
And to that point, to kind of move things along, because I know we kind of went off on an admittedly very topical tangent, but for the sake of time and getting to, uh, I think what the people that were at the photo shoot that we did, getting to the question that I'm sure we're going to get for that is for what we were able to capture on the day of. Uh, what are the examples of what media like that particularly can be used for? We hear a lot, I think, about doing a particular photo shoot for a project that you have coming out immediately and doing it for that purpose. Um, or on the administrator's end, doing a photo shoot to update your professional headshots for LinkedIn, things like that. What was this? What can the artist that showed up on Friday expect these photos to be able to be used for?
I think I want to answer that in two parts because so there's the side of it when it's talking about what this organization does. And what we do is help to brand and establish all those people who got those professional photos done as professionals, right? We're helping to uh add validity and credibility to the work that they're doing, right? To be able to show that these things that they are doing is actually going somewhere and contributing to something. So for NCEG, those photos are going to be used for personnel announcement, um CE roster reveals, executive headshots, things like that. I mean, we could even use them for magazine covers, right? Like tons and tons and tons of graphics,
Mm.
professional graphics, right? That's what those photos are going to be used for. But in the spirit of what it is that we're talking about, and I want to point out exactly where these two things overlap. If you are an artist or even really even an exec who came to our photo shoot and you got your photos taken and you didn't take, post, or speak to your audience about any of the things that were going on behind the scenes, about the community and camaraderie of everybody else that was there, about how half the people in the room were nervous because they're ultimately camera shy, how you might have been nervous because you're ultimately camera shy, you didn't let any of that stuff show to your audience, and all you're doing is waiting for those final photos to come out, you are making a grave mistake with regards to how you think about this content that's supposed to brand you. Because so that goes for anyone, even if you're planning your own photo shoot now, because you didn't come to ours, or you're, whatever, right? You're planning a photo shoot, you're planning something that's like this high quality thing for your brand as an artist or an executive or creative or whatever. And the only thing that you want to show is the final result. That's a mistake being made out of an old mentality. Because what your audience wants to see, they want to see all your nerves. They want to see all your preparation. They want to know what it was like for you being in your skin, getting ready to that for that moment. All of like the things that you were anxious about, and then seeing the final result about how you overcame all of that in order to establish yourself as somebody who's being validated by either our organization or some media platform or whoever, or self-validation, right?
Mm.
Like, and that's the real story. The real story lies in your ability to overcome all of those things that's holding back every single person who also finds themselves struggling with self-doubt, self-confidence, that all of us go through. And that's why you can't be a character in that. You just got to be you.
Mm. Very, very poignant. And I think so Atlas, I do want to end this with you because I don't normally do that, but I think it's incredibly relevant here. There are two questions that I want to ask, I suppose, or two different perspectives that I want to ask. There are so many platforms, I think, that your average person, well, at least going millennial and below, um, there are so many platforms that kind of require at least some kind of visual presence, right? Everything has a profile picture or like a GIF that you can put to represent you, or one of like the little, like if the platform supports like an avatar of some kind. There's so many platforms that we have to keep up with that require or at least promote you having some kind of visual presence to represent you. From kind of the modern artist's perspective, how many platforms, right, should they be prepared to have some kind of visual presence for, and to what extent can they just reuse the same pictures to kind of stand for multiple purposes?
Um, I had a very different answer to this question at the beginning of the conversation, but I actually need to credit you and Derek, heavy, because this is kind of it's changed. Changed my answer to this question.
Mm.
And thank you, Derek, for putting putting what you said in, making is giving more dynamic range to its importance, because I think it's really important to say that, yeah, I was going to list off some, platforms that were really important, but really what I can't in good conscience say anything other than wherever your fan or your customer is where you should be. I can't. I can't in good conscience say other than that. And I'm going through a similar situation. Me personally, just like my, even going through that as an artist myself, I'm learning something in this conversation here, like finding my own tribe. And it's been the advice I've been given to other people that I work with in the fandom space is you got to spend more time where people in your demographic are.
Mm.
It might not look like Twitter. It might look like me spending more time on YouTube, or the standards, the IG and the TikTok and the LinkedIn. Sure, but there are plenty of other platforms that are out there for you to be on. It really just depends on who you're engaging. And being able to be as many different places to find out. Now, there is a particular standard when it comes to making sure that you're always at your best at that regard, because you don't know if you're just getting started out, you don't know. So yeah, you need to present yourself a certain way. You need to make
Mm.
sure that you're at least covering your bases across the board in both professional and artistic means, but it needs to be authentic and it needs to be, streamlined to your engagement. But I really just I really have to, my feelings have definitely changed on my
Mm.
advice now. Um because it's just too important now. This conversation has been very, very great for me. So I appreciate the dialogue, because I feel like I grew a little bit today. So thank you.
Mm.
But it is authenticity at that next level of authenticity that Derek was just talking about, like that next level of it. Yo, like that should be, in my opinion, just as a tech person, that should be the ruler of, or the way in which you measure where and how you should show up.
Any closing statements from either of you gentlemen? I've got one of my own.
I'll just say, to put my 2 cents on that, is that once you understand that every platform is a little bit different, then that tells you what platform you should be on, right? Like if you're someone who you're more of an orator and you're good with words, then maybe, Twitter, X, or Threads is what's good for you. If you're someone who you're more visual, then maybe it is Instagram or TikTok. Um, if you're definitely like a storyteller and you like to do long form type of video content, then it might be Vimeo or YouTube, right? Know that there's both of those things. Um, and then if you're someone who, deals in more things related to like hospitality or family focused things, or, advice, religion, things like that, then you might find your home on Facebook still, right? Like, and it's
Pinterest.
not to say that there won't be times where you're not all of those things. Maybe there are times where I have something really profound to say and I put it out in a tweet and I put that same message on to, Threads and Instagram and a screenshot of it on Instagram and an entire post on Facebook and maybe even a blog article on LinkedIn, right? Like, but the point is, every single platform should be a reflective of what comes naturally and authentically to you. And there are some platforms that just might not.
Agreed. For my final statement, uh, don't be afraid to have multiple brands, but you don't want to conflate one brand for another just because you think you are you. I have both a music page now and 2 different photography pages now because they all cater to a different group of people. Just understand people, when you're portraying yourself to an audience that you are still trying to define yourself, understand that people gravitate to what is easily understandable. It is a lot easier for someone to understand that you are a musical artist and that's it. Even if you are a musical artist and a stylist and a designer and a producer and in 2 other industries that you may be completely proficient in, it is, I think, worth doing to separate your brands out so that when somebody sees one page and not another, that they can understand what they would either follow you for or not. I do want to thank, I think we got to everything in the chat. I do want to thank everybody that was watching today for tuning in. We will be back next week to continue talking about the things that we are going to be teaching to our members from the formal curriculum. One more time, gentlemen, while I try to let anybody type out anything that they may have left, anything else that you might want to say on this topic?
Just, I mean, speaking on what you said about like having like the different brands, um, because in case anyone may be confused about, well, how does that work, right? It's simply because don't conflate the industry and again what you're using to market your product. Don't conflate that with understanding who you are personally, and don't ever think that you have to be somebody different, right? Like you are a person who does multiple things. The multiple things that you do all need their own brands.
Mm.
That's just what it is, right? But you can still be holistically you in all of that. And I think that that's kind of, where that kind of lands.
Fair enough. If you like broadcasts like this, feel free to subscribe. And if you're going to subscribe, make sure you hit the bell next to it so that you can be directly notified when we go live and when we have other programs like this that we can share with you, because it's all good information for you to have as you continue to progress in your artistic journey. But until next week, I hope you all have a productive week and you get as many things done as you can. Stay efficient, work hard. We will see you all then.